What's up, I'm Troubleshoot. There's some exciting things going on in the world of AI, and in this quick sponsored guide, I'll be showing you Warp, their brand new Windows app, as well as their powerful agent mode that allows you to create natural language prompts with parameters, secrets, and more that you can easily use to rerun specific projects you've made and even share them online. Let's do it. To download Warp on Windows, head across to warp.dev and then choose Download Warp in the top right. Here, you can choose Mac, Linux, or their brand new Windows app by clicking this button here. Wait for it to download, then open the installer and click through it as you would any other installer. So here we go, bam, just like that. We'll launch Warp, and once it opens, you can get to prompting pretty much straight away. Inside of here, we can run normal commands as we would in any terminal, or we can just type plain English here that'll be interpreted and the agent will take over. So for example, I can cd into C:\tab and it gives us a few options in this nice pop-up. So let's go with users, my username, tab, downloads, and let's go into a test folder here. We can carry on running at normal commands, but let's do something interesting. Inside of this folder, we can say download ffmpeg and place the exe in this folder, where upon hitting enter, the AI agent will think about it, give us a response, and here's a command. We can either click run or just hit enter, and the command that's been typed out is run, and the response is here. So for example, just like that, we've now downloaded ffmpeg, and it'll use 7-zip to execute it. First of all, it checks if 7-zip exists. If it does, it'll give us a command to run, or if it doesn't, it'll allow us to download and install that automatically. Here, it's running a few commands. Once it's done, it tells us exactly what happened. So ls, here we have ffmpeg.exe, and as you'd expect, running commands will run as usual. So for example, ffmpeg version, bam, here we go. This is what's set up in this folder here. Pretty cool. However, we can get a lot more advanced. In the top left, you'll find this tiny icon, warp drive, where we get these here. We've got a couple of workflows already set up, where if you click on one of them, it'll give you a sample workflow at the bottom. Let's just make a new tab to make it a bit more clear. Click, here we go. So, example workflow, it allows us to echo some text, and anything that's highlighted like this here is a variable that was suggested to change. So we can click the edit button and change the argument from who you're saying hello to, from world to, let's go with Kevin. Update, our workflow was updated, and if we head back to it, hitting enter, there, it just echoes, hello, Kevin. Pretty cool. This is as simple as it gets. Most of these commands are designed to work under Linux, not specifically Windows, so this, for example, wouldn't work, but we can use it to help us write and run Git commands, for example, and things like that. But more exciting, we can create a new file here in a new folder, for example. We'll call it tests. Then we'll make a new file in here, so new prompt, and we can give it a name. So for example, I'll call this changelog, and this downloads Git history and creates changelog for major versions. Then we can enter a prompt here in plain text, for example, scrape this URL here for commits from my GitHub project, and using the description, create a markdown file called changelog, where every release and its important changes are listed. If you'd like to make something easily adjustable in the future, for example, this link here, I'll just cut it out as such, and we can use this plus button here to add an argument. This will add a normal unnamed argument, so argument 1, inside of 2 squiggly brackets. However, we can actually change this to be, say, URL. Now, we have a URL argument. Let's say this is a GitHub URL, and we can enter the value here. Just like that, we've now created a simple argument. We'll do the same for the file name here. Not that it's important though, and let's call this, say, file name. It makes a new one. Let's say output file name, and we'll make it changelog.md. Create, and just like that, we've now made a new workflow. If we open a new tab, close the previous one, and reopen our project here, you can see how things would look if we shared this over the internet just by clicking the 3 dots next to it, followed by share, and we can share this project over the internet, though we'll need to sign in first with a free account. Keep in mind, everything I've done up to this point, and even running this, wouldn't require an account at all. So for example, let's see what it actually does. This website for commits, and make a changelog here. We can edit the prompt, change the arguments here, for example, or we can run it as is, which I'll do. I'll just hit enter, it'll think about it for a moment and come up with a game plan, which, once it's done so, we'll run the command, and it's downloaded the page as an HTML file. Here it is inside of the folder. It'll then look at it and try to pull out information from it, which may or may not work. So it's reached into it, but nothing has come out of it, sadly. So instead, it'll try and reach out and get the latest commits as JSON, which is a much more readable format format for a computer. Let's try run this. It thinks about it, and this one should be a bit more successful. So it reaches out, gets a response, then creates a game plan once more. Here you can actually see we've got some real information from my project. It's covering the major updates here, for which it's doing the last 2 of them. Just like that, let's hit enter to run this, and now we've created our own markdown file with a very simple changelog. All we entered was plain text at the very beginning, it thought about how to do it, and at the very end we've got actual working code, or our task is successfully complete. So let's take this empty file, which is just plain text with formatting, paste it into a website, and here we go. We've now got a very simple changelog, some new features, and things like that. Obviously, we can go back and ask it to do more if we wish, change the styling, etc. But for now, this is fine. Let's do something a bit more exciting. In my downloads folder here, I have a bunch of receipts. These, of course, are examples, but let's say you scan these in, and you'd like to, for example, digitize them. Let's do exactly that. In a new tab, let's go ahead and make a new prompt, but we could choose a workflow, notebook, or even environment variables if you wish to have a more secret place to store variables, which we can access in different prompts. But for now, let's make a new prompt, and let's give this a title of digitizing receipts. Then we'll say scan PNGs and turn them into a CSV file. Then our prompt will be something along the lines of working from this folder, find receipt images, and convert them into a CSV file with items, date, and price. Let's create this, and it seems that we've hit our personal limit without signing in. So, making a free account and signing in by clicking the button in the top right, we can then sign in our browser by either signing in with GitHub, Google, single sign-on, or just an email address. And just like that, we're now signed into Warp, and we're recreating this simple example. I'll save it, and now we've got it down here. Keep in mind, you don't actually need to sign in pretty much at any point ever really. Using this is completely free, and if you have an account, it just opens a couple more doors, higher usage limits, and things like that. So now that we've got this project and we've signed in, we can actually share this online. So for example, our changelog here, we can click the 3 dots next to and share. Now we can set anyone with the link to have access as such. There we go. And just by copying this link, people can punch it into their browser and get access to this particular prompt straight away. Not to mention, there is actually a web version of the agent mode, which you can access over here from app.warp.dev, where you can do things online without even needing to download Warp in the first place. But let's switch back to here and see what our digitizing project actually does. So if we just hit enter to run this, it'll then think about it. So for example, it's getting and checking the different files in this folder, and it's coming up with a game plan as we speak. So it's telling us to install Python, if not already, then install the required packages and create a Python script. Would you like me to help set this up? I'll say, yes, please do it for me. Just like that, the agent will take over and start doing things for us. So it'll check to see if Python's installed, then it'll install the necessary packages, then it'll test to see if things are working properly, and if anything else is needed, it'll try reaching out and installing it, or at least telling us how to download it. So for example, here it's trying to use winget, a built-in Windows package manager, to install something. If any errors are reached, things need to be changed, it'll refactor and correct itself as it goes. So it'll try reinstalling once more, because the last time it had an error. It then reruns a fixed command until we eventually get to where we want to be. So now that that's installed, it'll try making a Python file where it can then complete our project. After a bit of pondering, this is what came out of it, so looks pretty promising. I'll hit enter to apply these changes, and just like that, in the working directory, it should have created this file. For now, it's just cuses my username, so here's the file. If any issues are found, it'll try and fix them. For example, it found compatibility issues, for which there were a few, and this time we've actually had a successful response from it. So all 4 receipts were processed successfully, and we've got a file output here. Having a look at this folder, there's a CSV file here, which contains all of our different items. I can then open this with Excel, for example. So here I've just opened it in LibreOffice, and as you can see, the result isn't exactly perfect, but it's definitely workable, for which it's got things entered properly, including the total, and this second receipt where it's got 2 items from the second receipt list here. For some reason, it skipped over the first. Third receipt, it seems to have punched in things here correctly, except for the last item, and from the fourth one, it's only punched in the total. So while not perfect, it's an okay starting point. Let's say we wanted to improve it, as the first time it spits out something, for example, one-shotting this entire file over here, it may need a bit of tweaking to get things going properly. So I'll say this worked, but it skipped quite a few items, and the totals, such as total and cash, appear where they shouldn't. I'll hit enter, it'll then refactor the code and try to improve things a bit, which we can just keep doing until we get an expected response. And I think we probably had an issue with this one here. So it's trying to create excluded terms, for example, and it's trying to make a more robust pattern for reading and finding items from our receipts. Here, it's come up with a response with quite a bit more code to it. Let's see what this does, where hopefully we get a better response. It'll try to run our command once more, and let's see what kind of result we get this time. So there we go. It's looking at the results. It's now trying to improve things even further, fine-tuning itself, which I didn't even ask it to do. And now, opening up the file, we already have a way better response compared to its first attempt, where it's missed quite a bit of text, added the totals and things like that here, to where this looks way more true to life for what these receipts actually are. Not to mention, in the background, it's still actually trying to improve itself even further. So there we go, it now seems to be done, and the result that we got is infinitely better. With this, we can actually do something as pretty much 99% of these things are inputted properly, which seems to be pretty true, although it's missed one item here, and one item on this final one. This is still a fantastic starting point, considering I can just throw a bunch of receipts into this and have some actual usable text spit out from it. So obviously, while OCR isn't perfect, this is a fantastic starting point, especially to fix up with just a bit of manual work. The fact that I haven't even created a single line of code in this absolutely monstrously large file, that's pretty useful. Speaking of code, let's try something even more exciting. If you're a coder, you most definitely know about Docker. I've got Docker installed on my system, but if you didn't, obviously running the next few commands would probably install it for you anyways. Over here, I've got the source code to my website that has a bunch of different articles on it, all of which are written in Markdown and processed by a program called Hugo into a web format. So HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Say that I haven't actually set up a way to get this into Docker files, for example. How exactly would I convert this Hugo project into a Nginx container with all of my web files in it? Well, say I have no idea what I'm doing there. Let's take this folder and inside of a new tab or a new prompt, let's convert Hugo project into Nginx container. So using the Hugo project in here, create a Nginx Docker container and files plus a Docker compose file so I can easily host my website locally. Let's create this and give it a run to see what comes out of it. First, it'll check what's in the directory. Once it understands what's going on, it'll make a new folder for Docker, punch in some configuration for Nginx, create a Docker compose file, which I asked it to, and just like that, it's created our project for us. So inside of this folder, we've got a Docker folder here with a Docker compose file and an Nginx configuration file. If we have a look at this Docker compose, it's setting up a Docker file with our configuration, and things should just hopefully work. So we can just give it a shot. It's basically just taking this public folder here, which has my HTML and things like that in it from the built Hugo project, and setting them up in Docker. So let's change directory by running in terminal. There we go. And let's run Docker compose up. Just like that, it starts setting up our project, starts it up. We've got it running in Docker and opening this URL. Now you can see this site's just working, now running off localhost out of this Nginx container. That's pretty good. But what if we say this public folder didn't exist, and instead it's going to go ahead and convert my existing source files, which are just a bunch of markdown files, into that public folder and then create the Nginx Docker compose. So I'll say I've removed the public folder as Hugo needs to generate those files, then use it in Nginx. I'll run this, it'll move back a folder, run Hugo, and just like that, would you look at that, we now have a public folder here with everything inside of it. So that's pretty impressive. Let's say instead of mounting the public folder, include the files in the container as the folder changes and may not exist. It'll then stop our project, create a new Docker file, which copies the public folder, and then uses those files with Nginx to host. So now it'll build our brand new Docker file, and if it comes into any issues, it'll try and fix them. So for example, here a file wasn't found, so it'll try and fix that, and this time things should work properly. So building once more, this time it's actually copied the files as we hoped and built it into just one Docker container. So again, this page just works again, and this public folder over here isn't actually used by our project as it's included in the actual Docker container. So if we, for example, stop and restart our container, even though that folder doesn't exist, it's not actually being referenced at all, and the page should just work. And it does, simply because things were actually copied properly. That's really cool. So again, just using simple natural language, I've actually turned a very simple prompt, such as this one here, to convert a simple website I've created into an actual functional Docker container and project from scratch. So not only did the warp.dev agent create these files for me, it actually thought about what was going wrong and patched them in real time as it was working through this problem. That's one of the major strong points of having a smart AI agent that can actually look at output from your system instead of needing you to copy and paste it back and forth, say if you were using Copilot or ChatGPT, things like that. Having an AI agent that can actually run commands on your system, even if you need to press enter for it to work properly, which is super important, by the way. If it tries to delete a folder, that's super important, for example, you don't want that to happen automatically. Here, with this, it seems to run commands that it understands are completely fine, such as checking to see if a folder exists or a file exists, but it won't try and delete things, for example, without your permission first, which is pretty cool. So while this is a super powerful program, we can take it a step further even. I'll just make a new tab here. Let's say make a new folder in my downloads and cd into it, which it does. And now we can say create using 3.js, a 2D side scroller game where a character skis on ASCII slopes. WASD should be used for controls and the environment naturally randomly generated and displayed using ASCII art. As this is a much more loaded prompt with a ton more to be done, this obviously needs fine-tuning and help from me, even though it comes up with a pretty solid game plan by itself. This, as a much bigger project, needs me to test it and work through issues with it, as I really doubt this can one-shot it, though that would absolutely blow me away if it could. So it's created the front end, now it's creating the back end. So there we go. Now it's creating some actual game logic, styling, displaying a score, and just like that, it should be done. Having a look inside the folder, we've got two different files here. We've got a game file where all of the styling and the actual container itself is, and the game.js file where all the logic and things like that should be, and this file is pretty long as is, so let's see if this thing actually works. Opening it in a browser, well, it says we've just lost, so that's pretty much that. The UI does look pretty good, but there isn't actually a game showing anywhere. If we have a look in the console, for example, we do have the game canvas, and things should be working, but I don't actually see anything except for the UI. So I don't see the game itself. I only see the instructions, score, and a few milliseconds after loading, the game over screen. Now it'll refactor the code, and we should hopefully get something better out of it. So let's reload, and the score's going up. We did eventually, well, cease to exist, but for some reason we don't actually see anything. So the score increases, but again, I don't see anything but the UI. I assume it's working. I just see a black screen with, I guess, black text, or just nothing for the actual game. Let's see what it comes up with now. And now, even though it's not visible, it's given us some debug info, which we can copy, paste in, and I still see nothing but UI, such as instructions and score and debug info. Let's send that. And for some reason, it's changing out of text mode and instead trying to run these as commands. So I'll click pair over here, and now it should interpret it as text. Let's see what it comes up with. While we're not exactly winning just yet with its latest changes, there's definitely something happening here. It looks a bit better, and now there's two of them. So let's carry on trying. Well, I asked it to add logging, and this should also help troubleshooting issues. Obviously, you can't expect to make a full game without any kind of coding knowledge, as you'll likely have to kick this thing in the right direction a few times, as you will any AI agent. But with minimal coding experience, you should still be able to throw together something pretty simple that works pretty much exactly as you'd hope. Well, there's not too much happening, but you can see A and D moves us sideways, W is jump, so we're getting somewhere, I suppose. Well, this looks a lot more promising. The text seems to fall from the top to the bottom, and if we touch anything red, we need to restart. So I guess it's going with a top to bottom kind of vibe instead of a side to side, which is what I was expecting, but while it's definitely a bit difficult right now, it is somewhat functional. So now we've got even further where, well, we seem to touch red things pretty quickly as soon as we start, but holding a key to go sideways, you can see that land, or I guess terrain, is starting to scroll by relatively quickly. So things are happening here, just it's a bit fast and there's weird gaps between them. And here we go, after quite a bit of generation and trying things again and again, this is what it's eventually come out with. It scrolls downwards instead of upwards, but with a couple of changes that could of course be fixed. You're this little character that jumps from side to side. I really really like the small little animation it's come up with, both for warping it as it goes sideways, as it jumps. There's a little pad that pops up when it jumps, and it slowly speeds up, so sort of a doodle jumpy kind of game. The goal is to avoid these red characters while you surf around these white ones, so while it is pretty basic, this is actually pretty cool for only about half an hour worth of playing with this thing, and the more that we play with it, the better result that we could have got from it. Obviously, I'd want to flip the direction that this thing scrolls in from side to side, add a bit of a grace period when you spawn in so you don't just instantly smack into a red character, but overall this isn't all that bad, especially considering that I haven't written a single line of code at any stage through this process, which is crazy. Having a look at the game files, this is the HTML file where everything is displayed. There's a bit of styling here, and at the very bottom it actually creates the canvas where this game is played. There's a bit more styling here. The terrain page contains different functions for generation and things like that, positioning, etc. And the actual game file over here is absolutely massive with tons of comments speaking about how exactly this thing works. And of course, this is where the majority of the logic happens, how fast the game goes, how wide it is, and things like that. The code here obviously isn't the absolute best peak quality, but it is functional, which is pretty surprising. This tool created it just out of a very simple command, and of course a bit of help. I just opened up the developer console here with Control-Shift and I, copied whatever errors appeared and pasted them back into the console for it to troubleshoot and solve. So what we got out of it is actually super impressive, although it could do with a couple of stylistic improvements. But yeah, that's pretty much that. Again, this can be done without even creating an account in Warp. The only reason I did that is that I can have a couple more of these projects saved on the side that I can click at any stage to continue working through. It's a pretty cool example of what warp.dev's AI assistant has done for me, and that's pretty much that. AI assistants are a seriously powerful tool, and warp.dev is a fantastic tool to add to your Windows arsenal. So yeah, you'll find download links down below. Hopefully this video was useful for you. Once again, thank you to Warp for reaching out and sponsoring this guide. I really enjoyed creating it. This is a fantastic, powerful tool. Thank you all for watching. My name's been Troubleshoot, and I'll see you all next time. Ciao.